Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be looking at this beautiful, beautiful children's book called Season of the Witch. A spellbinding history of witches and other magical folk. I like to think of myself as part of this long lineage of magical folk, but not in the sense that you're expecting. I'm actually a historian of witchcraft. I study it in my doctorate program, and not the sort of studying where I'm casting spells or something like that. But I try to understand the history of witches and witchcraft, the people who practiced hundreds, even thousands of years ago. And so when I saw that they had created this book to introduce the history of witches to young children, I was just so excited. I immediately went to the register and bought a copy because I just couldn't stop myself, even though it's not exactly a scholarly source on witchcraft. It's a beautiful representation of their stories. So I wanted to take a look at it, and I have not cracked it open for very long yet. I just put it on my bookshelf facing forward because the cover is just so gorgeous. I particularly love this witch in the middle. She's wearing a beautiful cloak. And if you haven't worn a cloak before, I highly recommend it because it makes you feel so magical. And I really love this hat as well. I have a hat, a witch's hat, made by one of my nearest and dearest and bestest friends, Nora. And she embroidered it with mushrooms. Perhaps I'll do another video just showing you what that hat looks like, because it's gorgeous. I think it's one of my most prized possessions. But I have yet to own a broomstick. That's probably the next thing. It's a real, handmade broomstick, not a manufactured one that you would get at a hardware store or something like that. It's just such a gorgeous cover. I think before we open the book, I'm gonna set the mood, set the scene a little bit, and light this candle that I have here. So this is a candle that I've had for a very, very long time already. It's a sandalwood candle, and it's supposed to have hints of patchouli, but I can't really detect those scents. It just smells kind of like the woods, a little bit earthy, but more like incense than anything else. But anyway, I've had it for a long time already, and because it's a soy blend, I swear that it takes a lot longer to burn. So I've had it for ages. But let's light it. Let's bring my lighter over here. I love when candles are in amber glass because once you've burned through them, you can reuse the jar for things like cotton balls or Q-tips, or in my case, little apothecary items like rosebuds and lavender and elixirs and potions. My friends like to joke that I have a little apothecary cabinet, and that's true. I was raised on the prairies, and I have a pretty deep connection to nature and all that it has to offer, so I always keep a lot of herbs and simples on hand, sundries. Okay, so let's open this up, shall we? So upon opening the first page, there's this beautiful paper with these little bats and comets, I guess. It's kind of weird. It's a little bit cosmic, like solar system themed. But I like it. I like the colors. Okay. I love this page already. It's so pretty. Season of the Witch, which is actually an incredible song if you've never listened to it before, by Donovan. It's from the 70s or the 60s. I can't quite remember. I'm sorry. But it's written by Matt Ralphs and illustrated by Nuria Tamarit. And as you can see here, there's a cute little cat. He actually looks like my cat. A little bit. My cat's a tiny bit fluffier. And a little mouse with a wand. It's kind of sparkling. And the cat's wearing a little purple witch hat. Something that I think a lot of people don't know is that we don't fully understand the origins of witch hats. They started showing up in around the 1700s in popular culture, things like postcards and illustrations, but before that, paintings of witches, especially from around the 1400s, during the Salem witch trials, depict most witches without a hat. So the jury's kind of out on when they started showing up. But the witches that we think of now are often associated with the pointy hat and the buckled shoes. Sort of that Wizard of Oz, Wicked Witch of the West look. Okay, so we have a table of contents here. And it looks like it starts with ancient Mesopotamian magic. And from Mesopotamia, we go to Egypt, then ancient Greek magic, Slavic magic, Norse magic, medieval magic. Oh, Mother Shipton's one of my favorite witches. South African magic, Japanese magic, early modern magic, which is where I mostly work in, and modern day magic. So where we are today. And I love this border. It's so beautiful. If I was a kid and I had this book, I would be obsessed with it. Okay. Let's start. So our first page here is called A Magical Gathering. Dusk falls like a soft blanket over the forest clearing, The air is warm and filled with magic. A gathering of people murmur secrets and swap spells. A woman snaps her fingers, bringing a campfire to life. Birds and animals fall silent, and even the stars seem to listen. It is time for the witches and sorcerers to tell their tales. Oh, what a beautiful opening. I love that. So we see a lot of the witches that we saw on the cover, including my favorite cape lady, gathered around a campfire telling stories. I love this as a framework for the whole book because a lot of historical witches have been silenced just because a lot of them were persecuted. So the idea of them being all together and telling their story is kind of incredible. So I think we'll read the introduction and then we might breeze through a little bit more of the bulk of the book, doing little paragraphs here and there, but okay. From ancient magic users in Mesopotamia to modern day Wiccans, people have believed in magic for thousands of years. Nearly every culture throughout history had their own special magical beliefs, traditions, and practices. But what exactly is magic? Magic was a powerful force to be feared and respected, invisible but ever present. Some ancient cultures thought that if they left gifts at temples, their gods and goddesses would share their magic in the form of blessings. Others believed magic was a force that could be harnessed by magic users themselves. Magic users have gone by many names throughout the centuries: witches, warlocks, sorceresses, wizards, and shamans, to name only a few. They believed they could use spells, potions, and magical ceremonies for good or bad purposes, such as telling the future or laying on curses. We'll begin 5,000 years ago at the birth of human civilization in the Middle East, where magician priests use their skills to heal the sick. Follow magic's silver thread through history to visit fierce Norse sorceresses, spell-muttering medieval witches, voodoo charm casters, and many more. So get comfy, turn the page, and begin your journey into the magical world of witches. Oh, don't mind if I do. Okay. This reminds me a lot of, I don't know how many of you have read these before, but the DK Eyewitness books. This is like an illustrated version, but just that like gorgeous collage style illustration. I mean, with the Eyewitness books, it was photographs, but okay, so we're starting with ancient Mesopotamian magic, 310 to 500 BCE. And there's a little bit of a welcome, a summary of how magic was used in medical ways. I love that there's this sort of narrative element in each chapter. It's really beautiful. Okay. So I remember from looking through this that they feature some of the most famous witches from each, or magic users from each period. And I love the illustration style. God, it's so beautiful. So beautiful. They have a border on each page. Like, it's just so gorgeous. Oh, this is fantastic. Okay. This is what I was talking about. Dispelling the myths. What a witch looks like. The classic witch in countless stories is an old woman wearing robes and a pointed hat, flying on a broomstick with her black cat companion. But where do these ideas come from? So there's this conversation about broomsticks here. It says, the broomstick myth may have come from witches creating potions from strong smelling ingredients. The potions affected the witch's mind, creating sensations that made them feel as if they were flying through the air. They applied these potions to their bodies with a broomstick. See, if I was a kid and I read that, I would say, wow, I would like some more information. With a broomstick. Okay, interesting. There's also this conversation about printed hats, black pointed hats. Might have worn one for Halloween. And here's what I mean about the contentious history. One theory dates back to the Middle Ages, when it was fashionable for women to wear a type of headdress called a hennin. Wow, hats as tall as 30 inches. Around this time, the Catholic Church believed witches were usually women and that they gained their magical powers from the devil. And a lot of people believed this, until the end of the 19th century to the early 20th. So, a little bit of just short, abbreviated history on hats here, which is wonderful. And green skin, as we all know from The Wizard of Oz. I haven't seen that movie in so long. Okay. Ancient Egyptian magic. God, I was so obsessed with ancient Egyptian history when I was a kid. Oh, there was this book, I remember. It was a gold-covered Egyptology book, and it had little pouches that you could open with little pieces of parchment inside, and it was just, it was so tactile, and it just felt, it was so fun. I loved it so much. So this is 300 to 30 BCE. Oh, and Heka, god of magic. Oh, I love this illustration. Oh, this is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. It is said that Heka, ancient god of magic, was present before the birth of all things. God, I could just look at that for hours. Oh, this is interesting. So there's kind of a section about magical artifacts, the books of the dead. I wonder if there's a section on grimoires. If you know anything about witches, you know that a lot of witches had grimoires. I won't say anything, I won't spoil it, just in case there's more. Okay, ancient Greek magic. Oh, this is so beautiful. The color choice is just spot on. Oh my god. Okay. Oh, a little section on magical jewelry, amulets, a type of good luck charm often worn as necklaces or bracelets. Gods and goddesses. So we're really starting with the deities, and we're going forward from there. Oh, the witch of ancient Greece. Oh my god. I love this illustration style. Oh, with these little folded open picture frames. This is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. I love these dispelling the myth sections. They're just thorough enough for the audience that they're meant for. It's perfect. I feel like they encourage children to go and do their own research if they so choose. So wands and familiars. Wands. A medieval spellbook called The Key of Solomon describes a wand as an important part of a witch's kit. Wands have been used throughout history by certain witches to channel and focus magic, but they weren't used as widely as you might think. Most witches created magic with only potions, rituals, and spells. And wands are still used today by many witches, including Wiccans, which we'll learn about later more in the book. I love that they clarify here, the wand itself does not contain magic. Magic comes from the witch, and the wand is used to channel it in a specific direction. Oh, this is amazing, this section on familiars. Being a witch could be lonely. Although they were respected for their magical services, many witches were considered outsiders in their community. That's very true. Familiars are magical spirits who take an animal form. Cats, dogs, goats, toads, ferrets, hares, rabbits, and even flies. According to some magical traditions, familiars choose the witch they want as their companion. If the witch agrees, they spend the rest of their lives together. Slavic magic. So this is something that I'm more familiar with as well. So I grew up listening to my mother's stories about Slavic witches and herbology and botany and all of those things. So this is from 50 to 1000 CE. I love that there's a little welcome section in each. It's welcoming you to Eastern Europe. This is the part that I'm really familiar with, that sense of foraging, gathering herbs. Spells and potions were used by Slavic witches to cure disease, ease childbirth, summon spirits, and even shapeshift. A potion's ingredients were of the utmost importance, but so was the way that they were harvested. Timing was crucial. The sun's position in the sky at the moment of harvest affected how well the ingredients worked. Midsummer's Eve as well here. What a beautiful illustration. I love these little birds. They're so sweet. Oh, and Baba Yaga. Yeah, I remember my grandmother telling me a lot of stories about Baba Yaga. The iron-toothed witch. Such a good story. If you ever have the opportunity to read the original folktale for Baba Yaga, then I highly recommend that you do. It's excellent, and you'll find a lot of connections to modern day stories in Baba Yaga. Oh, I love these sort of inventory sections. So this one's on cauldrons and potions. Most witches had big pots called cauldrons to brew potions in. Some cauldrons are set on 3 feet. Some are placed directly over the fire on stands, and some hang from chains. Oh, and the Battersea cauldron. This one is incredible. You can actually go and see it in the British Museum, which is incredible. And I am actually doing that very soon, so I'm really, really excited to see it. One of the most famous witchy artifacts, if you're interested in that sort of thing. You must be if you've made it this far through the video. There's a couple highlights here of different potions and the uses, making someone fall in love, putting a curse on them, and a lot of them were made using plants and roots. Crab apples. Oh, my grandmother had such a beautiful crab apple tree in the backyard of her house. And I ate so many crab apples, I would make myself sick. Muckwort is also a lovely thing, plant you can burn. You can drink it as a tea. It's gorgeous. And I love this sort of like kitchen witch aesthetic. Oh, it's so gorgeous. Oh, so the dung section is a little bit bizarre, but human remains, mandrake root, animals. Beautiful. Wow, they even have a little section on him. Wow, I didn't expect that. I guess that makes sense because he was a magic user. A Russian magic user. I love how the borders all align with the theme of each section. Okay, the next one is Norse magic. From Scandinavia. This is my beautiful caped lady. Once again, wish I could be her, because if you could just wear a cape every day, oh my god. I would get so much more done. Everyone would listen to me. Oh, sea witches, magic weaving water witches. During the worst sea storms, when dark waves crash onto Scandinavian shores, beware of eerie voices on the wind and pale faces beneath the water. For these are sea witches, powerful supernatural sorceresses, as mysterious and unpredictable as the weather. Okay, another Dispelling the Myths section on spells and incantations. I love this illustration. Oh my gosh. Many witches use spells and incantations to wield magic. It is important to know that it's not only the words themselves that make the magic work, but how they're spoken. Well, pronunciation must be perfect. And they have this whole section on why we think of abracadabra when we think about casting spells. Okay, medieval magic. Oh, I love this little lady. These little mice. A simply furnished room is bathed in low evening light. Steam drifts from a cauldron, filling the air with the scent of nettles and thyme. Jars and pots line the shelves and bundles of herbs hang from roof beams. A wise woman sits at a table, muttering spells as she mixes a potion in a bowl. This is a really interesting representation of this witch being accused. A lot of people called, particularly medieval witches, cunning folk. I mean, a witch could also be a man, because they were known as healers, and they were also known for their sense of cunning. They were almost like gossip collectors in their own community, and people would come in and use their services to get the dirt on other people in their community. But they were also apothecaries, and so they put themselves in very vulnerable positions a lot of the time. Oh, Mother Shipton, here she is. Oh, I love Mother Shipton. The Yorkshire seer. One night in 1488, a girl destined to become one of the most famous witches in England was born in a cave. Of course she was born in a cave, near the Yorkshire town of Knaresborough. Legend has it that her birth was greeted by a violent thunderstorm and the rotten egg smell of sulfur throughout the area. Her name was Ursula Shipton. They talk a little bit about her physical appearance, how she looked. And she became most famous for her ability to foresee the future. It is said that she predicted the Great Fire of London in 1666 and the invention of iron ships. People visited her from miles around to ask about their fate, and she was given the name Mother because of the help and advice she gave. Taverns were named after her, and two still exist, one in her hometown of Knaresborough. Her cave is still open to visitors, and a statue of her sits on a bench in Knaresborough's marketplace. And there's a species of moth native to Yorkshire called Mother Shipton, which has markings that look like a face. And look, they've put a little moth right here. What a beautiful touch. I love that. Oh, and another one. Oh, there's ones everywhere. I didn't even notice. Oh, there is a section on grimoires. Oh, that's amazing. More on magical artifacts. So a grimoire is a spell book filled with magical instructions, as medieval witches were usually poor women living in the countryside with no formal education. Most of them did not own any books. Instead, they used word of mouth to share potion recipes, spells, and magical knowledge with other witches, their families, and any apprentices or students they had. and South African magic. They all seem to follow the same format, which is really great. This one doesn't really have specific dates though, which is bizarre. Prehistory to present day. Huh. There's a little bit on voodoo as well. This is an interesting illustration. Oh, Marie Laveau, Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. Oh, absolutely incredible story. It's hard to distinguish where the legend ends and the facts begin when it comes to Marie Laveau. Born in 1801 in the vibrant American city of New Orleans, Marie was a free black woman who became a healer, fortune teller, and the undisputed voodoo queen of New Orleans. Marie's name is still heard in New Orleans today. Gamblers call out her name for good luck when they throw the dice. Very important figure in the history of witchcraft. There's this whole section on voodoo dolls and charms. I know there's another sort of enchanted doll called a poppet that I think was used primarily in witchcraft originating in Britain, but there's a lot of different names for them. I love the variety of representation here. This is amazing. Like, I'm sure that a lot of people don't know the history of Japanese magic and witches and the history of the yokai, which is the fox. There's a whole history here. I love the way that they set the scene. It's really beautiful. Yamauba, Crone of the Mountains. Oh, there's a whole section on masks as well. A lot of this is based in folklore, which means if you're interested in folklore in general, it's kind of a nice curated selection of folkloric figures and artifacts that are based in the history of witchcraft. So this is the part of the history of witchcraft that most people are really familiar with. European witch hunters. And we all, when we imagine witches, we imagine them being burned at the stake a lot of the time. And this is where things started to get really complicated for these magic practitioners. Because the church started to become increasingly hostile towards a lot of these people. There were witch hunters. It was really dangerous. If you were accused of witchcraft, you could be persecuted quite quickly. By the mid-1700s, the witch hunting craze across Europe had started to die down. New laws such as the Witchcraft Act of 1735 were passed, undoing the previous laws in England and Scotland that had caused so much terror. And while this is true, a lot of persecutions continued, especially in smaller towns, and a lot of folks still believed that witches existed into the 19th and 20th centuries. It didn't just go away overnight. So. And the Salem witch trials, of course. Oh, I'd love to go to Salem someday. Fascinating part of history. And we have another magical artifacts section here with these beautiful little panels. Ways to catch a witch. Oh, this is fun. Here are some despicable methods witch hunters use to prove that people were witches. The water test. The witch hunter Lied? That's weird. Okay. Tied. Oh, I'm a little bit far away from the book, so I had a hard time reading what it was. Tied the suspected witch's thumb to her toe and threw her into a river. If she floated, it proved that she was a witch because the water rejected her. If she sank, it meant the water accepted her, so she wasn't a witch. Either way, it did not end well for the accused person. False familiar. The suspect was locked in a room under careful watch. If an animal, a rat, mouse, or even a fly entered the room, it was assumed to be the witch's familiar coming to help her, thus proving that she was a witch. Pricking. Oh, I'm familiar with the witch's mark. It was believed that magic users had a witch's mark, a small skin blemish that felt no pain and never bled. If the person didn't cry out when the blemish was jabbed with a needle, it meant they were a witch. Like, in all honesty, being jabbed with a needle depends on how big it is, but like, you might just have a high pain tolerance. Bizarre. Witch hunters were paid per witch they found, so they may have used, here we go, blunt or retractable needles to jab suspects and claim the reward. And walking. Some witch hunters forced confessions by making the suspect walk endlessly in a circle without stopping, sometimes for days. They were denied food, water, and sleep until they broke down from exhaustion. Desperate suspects often gave false confessions to make the torment stop. Oh, that's horrible. Okay, and so we've reached the last couple of pages in this book. Modern day magic. So this is interesting that they just skip over a lot of the history here, but I understand because this has to be an abridged version for children, but 1900 to the present day. Welcome to now. The practice of witchcraft in Europe declined between the 18th and the early 20th centuries as the age of scientific discovery progressed. New medical techniques meant that ancient beliefs in the healing powers of magic were no longer respected. That's very true that in the early 1900s, interest in witchcraft grew again. We have this lovely section on Wicca, the modern practice of Wicca, magic circles and seasonal solstice. Wiccans celebrate the seasonal festivals of the summer and winter solstices, the longest and shortest days of the year, and the spring and summer equinoxes, when day and night are of equal length. I love this illustration of a broomstick. Oh, that's beautiful. And it looks like we have Gerald Gardner, the father of witches, as our more modern day representation of a famous witch. Wicca was developed in England by writer and archaeologist Gerald Gardner. Okay, I think this is our last page. Time flew, my goodness. So we have this big moon. The tale continues, a silver thread. Embers and smoke drift from the dying campfire. All the tales have been told, and it's time for the witches to go home. They disappear between the trees, back to their places in history. Each leaves a trail of silver magic in the air, dancing like dust in the light of the moon. And now we've reached the end of our tale. There's much more to know about magic and its users than what lies within these pages. We would need a much bigger book. But now we can understand magic's place in our history. Oh, and look at this dedication. This book is dedicated to all magic users of the past, present, and future. The witches, warlocks, and wise women, the sorcerers, sangomas and shamans, the full voodoo queens, and all magical folk who saw further and deeper than ordinary people dared to look. Oh, I love that they leave the campfire at the end. That's so beautiful. So there's an index, and then a recommendation for another flying eye book. And then we have our little collage end leaf pages here. What's at the back of the book? Let's see. It's kind of like a line of different magical folkloric figures that continues from the front to the back. Well, that was a beautiful book. I really enjoyed looking at it. And like I said earlier, I wish I would have had something like this when I was a kid. So I think I would have discovered how fascinating the history of witches is much earlier in my life. Maybe it wouldn't have taken me so long. 2-3 degrees later, and I finally know what I love studying. But I highly recommend this book if you have a young person in your life who's interested in folklore, mythology, ancient to contemporary history, or just beautiful illustrations. Like, I just can't get over. I love this style. It's so colorful and like rich and just detailed. I could look at it for hours, and I sped through really for the purposes of this video not being too long. So I highly recommend if you're looking for something for a magical little being in your life, to go and pick up a copy of Season of the Witch. So thank you so very much for joining me today for this first ever video on my channel. And if this was something that you really enjoyed listening to, if you're still awake at this point, then subscribe. There'll be a lot more witchy, magical content coming up very